Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Jim Brosnan. I'm one of your hosts for Turf Tuesday. This is our June edition. I've got a great show lined up here for you today for the next hour. Before we get to that, though, I know that with every Turf Tuesday, there's business that people are interested in, particularly with pesticide credits. So I want to walk through that first, go through all those details, and then introduce our guests. On the pesticide credit front, you have done everything that you need to do to receive your pesticide credit for today's session. When you registered, you likely recall that you were asked to put all of your contact information. You selected the state in which you wanted pesticide credits, and then you provided your license number. That's all you need. We take the information that you put into the system when you register to compile a roster that goes to the different state agencies that have awarded pesticide credits for this session. That roster will be submitted within 24 hours of today's session. So we do our best here at UT to get that information to the state agencies, and then they post it to their platforms wherever they may be, whether that's Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, and all the different entities that have awarded this session pesticide credits. If you have any questions about that, you can feel free to email me afterwards and I can point you in the right direction. The one caveat is you got to stay for the whole hour. The agencies require a 55-minute or longer exposure time for you to get your pesticide credit. So we clicked record here at 11:30 and we will get you out of here by 12:30 Eastern. And then you will have done everything you need to do to get your pesticide accreditation. I should remind you the session is being recorded. We put the recorded version of this on our UT Turfgrass YouTube channel. If you haven't checked that out, I'd advise you do so. All the historical Turf Tuesdays are there. And then recently, one of our extension specialists, Anna Duncan, has done a nice job kind of updating that site, posting some new content, particularly some POA videos from my program. So definitely check out UT Turfgrass YouTube. If you haven't done so already, we take the recorded audio that will post to the Tennessee Turf Tuesday podcast feed on Apple Podcasts. So you can find the recorded session there. Unfortunately, there are no pesticide credits for recorded viewings, be they video or audio. For our superintendent friends that are with us today that are interested in continuing education units from the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America, I will put the information on the screen towards the end of the session for you to log that into the GCSAA database. That code has absolutely nothing to do with pesticide or pesticide accreditation. It is only for continuing education units for golf course superintendents. So that'll flash up on the screen as we get to the end of our time today. And then last but not least, for those with questions as you go, there'll be a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. You can type your question in there, and we will do our best as a group. I'm here with Dr. Bowling, Dr. Sorokin, and Dr. Horvath. We'll do our best to kind of filter those questions to our guests and answer them live. In the event we can't get to one, we'll try to type the answer back into the box and thread everything together so it's relatively logical. I think that does it for all the business of today's session. Let's get into introducing our guests. I like to joke, I should have probably titled this session, I'm Getting Old, or maybe John and Brandon, we're all getting old, because we have
I am old.
We have two of our newest faculty in the Southeast with us today. From the University of Arkansas, Dr. Wendell Hutchens and Dr. Hannah Wright-Smith. It's going to be a pleasure to talk to them and introduce all of you to them as two new experts within the region. So without further ado, old guy's going to sign off here and give the mic to Hannah and Wendell to talk about themselves on Turf Tuesdays. So welcome to the two of you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys having us.
Yeah, we're excited. So I look up to Jim a lot, and I think I put him in a group text with a couple other people that I look up to. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us. Wendell, did you want to?
Yeah. So appreciate you all having us on the show today, and thanks for that introduction, Dr. Brosnan. It's good to good to be a part of it. And my name is Wendell Hutchens. I'm a turf pathologist at the University of Arkansas. So study a lot of turfgrass diseases, mainly focusing on root disease issues, things like spring dead spots, take all root rot, Pythium root rots, and other things. So we get plenty of disease here in Arkansas, especially this spring. We were just talking about that before we started the recording. Is we've had a historically rainy spring, so it has been plenty of disease activity here in Arkansas. So I'm not sure how it's been in Tennessee, but I've had plenty to do this spring. We'll just say that.
And
I have some world class dollar spot and brown patch going right now, Wendell. It's spectacular.
It's the thing of beauty, isn't it? I was out scouting at the farm last night, and you could just see mycelia everywhere, and things were firing up, and fungicide treatments were breaking down days or even a week before they should. So it's been a tough year for growers, a great year for pathologists. So.
Cue somewhere the Pat Jones pathologists are weird remark, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
You said it, not me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a weed specialist. So I focus on managing weeds, identifying weeds in turf. I also have responsibilities in specialty crops and in forages. But turf kind of covers a majority of what I do. I am new to turf, so I've been doing turf for about 1.5 years. And like I said, Jim and Becky both have been really helpful in guiding me through the turf world, and it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy it.
Is the scythe in the background? Is that like a forage tool that you take out on forage visits, or?
It's really more for people. I take out my problem people. That's what that's for, really.
Is that why Dr. Richardson's not on this today?
Maybe.
Keep it sharp.
We wanted to focus on the young people, John.
Oh, that's right.
Oh man.
So you kind of touched on this already, but I guess why don't Wendell, you start and tell the folks listening. I mean, we've got a lot of our extension specialists and agents are on here. We've got a lot of lawn care folks on here, several golf course superintendents, folks in athletic fields and sod, kind of the whole landscape of the industry. Just because you two are both pretty new to this group, like maybe tell a little bit of like your kind of how you got into turf, what drew you to the industry, kind of your turf story, so to speak.
Yeah. For me, it's I think it's pretty similar to a lot of folks that get into turf. I loved sports growing up. I played golf, played baseball, played football, loved being outdoors. Was pretty athletic, but certainly not athletic enough to play Division I sports. But I wanted to go to a Division I school. So I thought, well, how in the world can I be around sports if I'm not going to be on the team? And my brother actually owned a landscaping business growing up. So I'd help him on the side and cutting grass and helping, prune and fertilize and things like that. And didn't think much of it, but I did enjoy it, certainly. So when I was looking into colleges, I started looking at North Carolina State's and found out that they had a turfgrass program. I didn't realize that even existed up until that point, and immediately fell in love with the idea. So decided to major in turfgrass, and with the full intention of becoming a golf course superintendent. And then about 1 year before graduation, I met Dr. Jim Kearns at NC State, and he taught one of my classes in undergrad. And really, we hit it off, and I thought turf diseases was fascinating, and I thought he was a great guy. And so he offered me the opportunity to do my master's degree there. So I did that, and really enjoyed the research and found out I love teaching and helping out with classes. So I wanted to go on for a PhD, and also I was just kind of not ready to leave the university life. And so I met Dr. David McCall at Virginia Tech. Decided to go up there and do my PhD with him, and here we are. So it's funny how you just I still haven't left college, I guess, right? Still in the university system. And I've been at University of Arkansas for about 2 years now, and it's been a really awesome experience, and loved every minute of being in the turf industry. And I say this a lot, but the people that make up the industry are really the highlight. I love interacting with superintendents, athletic field managers, lawn care specialists, and side growers, and everything in between. So I wouldn't trade it for the world. We'll say that.
Oh, it's such a small world too, right? Because Dave McCall used to work for Dr. Horvath, right? Things
Yes.
there's some game there, like of connecting people, and it's pretty wild. Going back to your master's real quick, I think you did your master's. Was it on movement of fungicide into the profile? Am I confusing that with somebody else?
That's right. Yeah. So looking at the effects of like post-application irrigation, as well as wetting agents and how they affect fungicide movement into inputting green soils. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. Loved that project, and I always joke a lot of that work was done with radioactive fungicides, so we could actually trace them in the soil. And I always say I'm surprised my hands aren't glowing at this point after how many hours I spent working with those things. But a lot of fun with that project, and then PhD, I wanted to focus more on disease epidemiology, so mapping out diseases with drones and things like that. So kind of a mixture of things, but all of it really centered around managing root diseases. So that's kind of the central theme of what I'm interested in.
So have you seen, like, this question for both you and Brandon, have you guys seen as pathologists in the field, like, is post-app irrigation more common now? Is that a thing people are doing?
Yeah, Brandon, do you want to go first, or do you want me to jump in? Either way.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's something that's changed over the last 8 or 10 years. We definitely, especially the systemic materials, we recommend a lot more often to water those in. Um, you know, I'd kind of twist the answer on Wendell a little bit and say, let's hear it from the horse's mouth, the guy that did the research. Can you water enough to get fungicides to move past the plant?
Yeah, that's
Right.
that's the number one question I get, Brandon,
Every time.
yep, can I move the product past the plant? And what we saw is you really can't with most products. There may be one or two that I call that are slippery fungicides, but they're compared to some herbicides and insecticides, they're really not that mobile. So like mefanoxam's the one example that comes to mind where it's a little bit more mobile than most fungicides, but it's very rare to actually, move a fungicide past the root zone. I mean, we tried, trust me, we were irrigating products in with like an inch of post-app irrigation, hammering in them, something that you would never do in the field, trying to figure out how to get those fungicides to move. And we never found them below 5 inches in the soil. So it's really hard to actually move them. But it's funny though, you talk about the adoption of it. I always laugh because I used to work with superintendents in Virginia doing my PhD, and I remember one time talking to the superintendent, and he told me, he said, he said they're telling us we need to water in our fungicides these days, and I thought, yeah, I know a little something about that. So it was funny to kind of hear it, through the grapevine of people starting to use those practices. So anyway,
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun. It was a cool project, and I think most people have caught on at this point.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the challenge, the way I kind of describe it to folks is if you look at the physical properties of the chemistry, that it makes sense why you found what you found, right? Like you have a material that's almost all of our fungicides are very low solubility, and that's desirable because we don't want it going into groundwater and other things, right? And then they're also they've got a pretty decent KOC, so they like to stick to organic matter, and we grow our plants in a organic matter rich environment. So, you know, it stands to reason that these things don't move very far when they're irrigated in. And you got to get them into the plant and then get them translocating through the plant, which is really what you care about. And it just it seems to me that makes all the sense in the world. The flip side of that, I'll also get asked the question, well, if I don't water it in or I wait, will that hurt me? And usually I always go back to the idea that the two models that we have for how fungicides move in a plant are, a wheat model and a corn model in grasses. And those are a lot bigger than an eighth of an inch bent grass plant on a putting surface. And we don't have a real good idea of how that relates to that small plant in terms of how fungicides translocate through that small of a plant. And so I don't think it necessarily hurts you if you don't water it in or you wait to water it in, but certainly I know in some of my trials, we've seen a little bit of an improvement in performance when a material is watered in versus when it's not. But I always think of it as it's a little tweak that helps it do a little bit better. It's not going to make it or break it.
I think you're spot on with that. I always kind of use the analogy of a pie, right? I think the biggest piece of the pie, or the biggest two pieces of the pie to get good disease control with a fungicide are picking the right product and applying it at the right time, right? If you get those two things right, you're probably going to get pretty good disease control generally. But like you said, if you want to get just a boost in efficacy, even if it's a slight boost, if you want that last 5% of the pie, that's why you water in your products, right? It may not be a total game changer, but it could make a slight difference.
Yeah,
So I'll ask the
100%.
question as somebody who's not a pathologist. I know, Brandon, you have done some work with back when Jesse Benelli was doing his PhD here. You guys did a really nice project with adjuvants, trying to move fungicides kind of deeper into the canopy to get to the place in the plant where they needed to be. Has there been anything done? And maybe, Wendell, you did this, and it'll show that I have not read your master's thesis. Has there been anything done with wetting agents to try to move fungicides deeper into the profile?
Yeah, so talking about Dr. Benelli's work, I read that dissertation through and through. He did some great stuff, and congrats, Dr. Horvath, on that project. But yeah, as far as wetting agents, they certainly can help. Once again, it's another kind of marginal thing as far as mobility. I use kind of the terminology that they help make the fungicide more slippery. And it's not, for lack of a better term, but essentially what they do is
that's a technical term, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It wasn't in a
technical.
peer-reviewed paper. We'll say that. But yeah, they kind of act. They break the surface tension of solution, and so in theory, it would kind of help that product slide down the plant more, kind of be more mobile and stay in solution through the soil. So we did see some pretty good differences when we apply wetting agents. But the big thing with wetting agents is you need to pre-treat your soils. So you really need to condition them. If you just tank mix one time at application, it's not going to make that big of a difference. But if you get on a program where you're treating every 2 weeks or a month with a regular wetting agent application, then your soils will be pretty conditioned, and that's where you're going to see more benefit. So that's kind of what I recommend is, pick your favorite wetting agent. We didn't see any differences between the wetting agents we tested on how fungicides moved. But pick your favorite wetting agents and get on a regular program. And obviously there's going to be more benefits than just moving fungicides. But you will see some benefit from a wetting agent application, or wetting agent program rather.
Yeah, I think it goes to, I always like how Dr. Sorokin kind of describes the impact of a wetting agent program isn't, there's nothing necessarily tremendously magical about what it does, but it makes that watering front more even across various things that are in the soil that are variable, that might make it less even if you weren't on a wetting agent program. And so then when you water that material in, you're getting that watering front to move more evenly through the soil, and then that allows all of the plants to take it up more effectively if you have that wetting agent program in place. And then the other thing, Jim, to the question about Jesse's project is that we looked at an organosilicone to try to allow materials to move down into the basal whorl of the plant, which is a tremendously difficult place for a liquid droplet to move outside the plant, and it doesn't get translocated very well in between the leaves in that basal whorl of the grass plant. And we did that to try to get it to move there, but the vast majority of the fungicide materials that we get as products in the industry are already formulated with surfactant packages to improve spreading, sticking, etc. So it's important to realize that like a lot of your herbicide materials, you guys recommend specific adjuvants to go with those herbicides to make them perform better. We don't. A lot of our fungicides are already formulated with those adjuvants as part of their formulation to improve performance and maintain its ability to stay on the surface if it's a contact fungicide or what have you. Like that's just kind of a typical formulation. And so any adjuvants that you're applying in addition to those should be done for a specific reason.
Yeah, I mean, that's super interesting. I mean, the fungicides and the herbicides are largely made by the same companies. Makes you wonder why the adjuvant piece isn't really built in to the herbicide development side, right? I mean, I can think of a handful of herbicide labels where the adjuvant's in, but it's a very small subset where most, I mean, Hannah, you know this, most of the labels talk about adding an adjuvant, and it's somewhat generic in a way where it talks about adding an adjuvant and it doesn't really specify which one. I mean, there's some nuanced cases where like the Pylex label or the Drive label want you to add methylated seed oil instead of crop oil or NIS, but most of them in my experience have been just, we want you to add an adjuvant. Thanks for reading. I mean, is that what you have seen too?
Yeah, that's what I've
Hannah,
seen.
what is the purpose of adding the adjuvants typically with a herbicide? Is it to burn down cuticle waxes and things like that to make the plant more able to take up the herbicide and be active, or what's the typical use of those adjuvants
Yeah,
for
that's
a
my
herbicide application?
that's my understanding is it's to aid with foliar uptake, and that can be, like you said, getting through cuticular waxes. Some of that could be deposition on the leaf tissue. I mean, Hannah, have you seen anything where in the adjuvant literature where there's particular adjuvants doing things other than those two mechanisms?
Not really. It's a similar thing, right? You decrease the surface tension of the water droplet so it spreads it out a little bit more, and then it helps it stick to the plant surface. That way you get greater uptake, mostly because it's just staying there rather than rolling off. That's pretty much what I've
Yeah.
seen. Yeah.
Brandon, that kind of reminds me, now I'm dating myself and feeling my age, is the work
You
that
gonna bring
Don
up
Penner
Penner?
did. Yeah, Don Penner at Michigan State, and he did that organosilicone, and what he found was it was a better penetrant, but also they could use lower rates because you had a better uptake
Yeah.
efficacy. So if
Yeah,
you didn't have to
was
go as
actually
higher
the
rate.
impetus for Jesse's use of organosilicones. Was we found
Yeah,
Don's paper where I think it was with dithiopyr, and
yeah.
Jim, Hannah, correct me, but that's a pre-emerge, right?
Yeah, with post activity on crabgrass, and I think that
Yeah.
paper
Right.
spoke to why it works at on
Yeah,
emerged
so that
crabgrass plants.
yeah, when they used the organosilicone, they were able to get that dithiopyr to go into the stomate of the
Yeah.
leaf, and the surface tension of the water was low enough that it actually rolled into the stomate. And I was like, light bulb,
Yeah.
maybe that'll
That was
help
my
us get the
dissertation.
fungicide where we want it to go.
Yeah, that was my dissertation too. If you remember, getting the plant to absorb high fructose corn syrup, actually, and I did that C15 labeled high fructose corn syrup, and you could track it on the leaf and it get absorbed, and you could see how it would show up in the roots. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, that's
But
wild.
yeah.
I mean, and I think, the irrigation side on the herbicide realm, I mean, Hannah, you could speak to this, and Becky can too, as a specialist in golf course irrigation and turfgrass irrigation in general. Like, we're seeing a need for that more and more as we're using active ingredients that have a higher injury potential. There's been an uptick in metribuzin use in recent years. Post-app irrigation is needed for that. It was always needed for Ronstar on a fertilizer carrier, and though as we've seen goosegrass emergence patterns maybe change, there's been more Ronstar on fertilizer use in season to position it closer to goosegrass. And now with the restrictions coming on Ronstar, there's an uptick in Stay Guard, which is same mode of action group 14 PPO, flumioxidin on a granule. And like, we just finished a project looking at post-application irrigation, the interaction of post-app irrigation and golf cart traffic on Bermuda grass injury with a Stay Guard app, because the herbicide granule itself, not only on the granule, but even the dust from the fertilizer spread has burn potential. And then the idea was, well, how much water do we need? Could we put too much? And what we ended up finding was you definitely needed to water. The injury was much worse if you didn't water in, and that was to be expected. But even with watering, and much like you mentioned, Wendell, we had a site where we could do a very small amount, one single spin of a rotary fairway head to wash it off the tissue, and then the ability to have another set of plots where we ran heads for almost an hour. We still had injury. It was less with more water, but we still had injury. The driver was when the cart traffic went through, because we had 2 traffic timings. And the takeaway from it was, if you're going to bulk spread these materials on a fertilizer carrier, you definitely need to water it in, and more is probably better. But you probably want to be cart path only the next day until at least noon, when that dew is off the Bermuda grass foliage on the fairway. I share all that in that my experience is that superintendents try to do their best to water these materials in, but often the age, I think is probably a fair word, Becky, the age of the irrigation system might not allow them to know exactly how much they're putting down. You think that's a fair statement?
I think it's a very fair statement, and I think too that we've seen, obviously if you're fortunate to have a newer irrigation system, you get a little bit more insight into what your output is and your precipitation rate. If you don't do that, you have to manually determine that through an audit. And what we've seen in surveys here is that a lot of superintendents have not been able to do that either. So there's definitely some knowledge gaps there around how much water we're really putting out. And all of this too hinges on distribution uniformity, which is also a mystery a lot of times with these systems. So
what's the average age of a golf course irrigation system in Tennessee right now?
Based on the responses that we got, 75%-ish are between 11 and 30 years of age or older, which is
Wow.
at or past the life expectancy for those systems. So
Wow. So does that make
Yeah, and
Hannah younger than most irrigation systems?
Uh,
well,
Pretty
she's not
close.
left.
yeah, not trying to make anyone feel old,
Close.
but maybe, yeah.
What were you
Yeah,
gonna
and
say, Brandon?
and the audit it illustrates another challenge to this. One of the things that certainly my eyes were opened, spending time doing some additional things that I do, where you realize that we can sit here in this Zoom room and tell all of these 112 participants, oh, you got to water it in with this much, you got to do this, you got to do that. But operationally, how do you operationalize those recommendations at a facility is as important as the recommendation itself, right? And Jim, I think you said it perfectly, right? Like, more is probably better. Think about cart path only in that situation for a period of time. Like, those are all things that like Becky said, you go do an audit. Like, that is not a non-onerous activity to go do just for one set of heads, right? And you can't assume that that one set of heads is what is on all of your golf course. To do an audit over a whole golf course is just like, I don't know how you would
Huge undertaking.
operationally do it.
yeah, huge
Like,
undertaking.
especially when you have customers, like you just, I literally don't know. You can put out the cups and you can learn how to do it, but to do that operationally on anything more than like a single putting green or something that you had some questions about is just onerous to even think about doing. And so you do end up with this question mark of, well, how long is it to put out a quarter inch of water? And then and I've also had situations where folks will tell me, like, there's no chance I'm putting out that much water. I'm just not going to put it out all at once. And so then it's like, well, break it up and try to make sure that it doesn't dry and things like that. There's ways to kind of think about how to get the job done without uh you know creating puddles on your putting surfaces. But it is a very difficult challenge to operationalize some of the recommendations that those of us in the academic community give. And it's one of the things that's been an eye opener in the last 4 or 5 years for me, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I'll tell a story. So working with a club here in Tennessee, and they're at Ultradorf Greens, and they went to plenty of my talks and wanted to implement something that wasn't an ALS inhibitor for POA control. So they started on a on a curb program to do that. Good superintendent read the label, and he said, yeah, I want you to talk. You talked about using curb at the rate structure that did well in the trials, and read the label and follow that for post-application irrigation. And I forget the exact values, and I don't want to misquote the label now, but whatever the number was in terms of the volume of water that was needed, he had a moderate enough irrigation system and understanding of how it worked. He was going to have to run heads for upwards of 30 minutes to do this. And his question, and I think this was a really smart one, was if I follow those directions perfectly, and this is a mobile herbicide, aren't I risking the herbicide moving away from the place where I want it to be? And he's 100% right. And it got into this, like you said, Brandon, like, well, the property best, and how your irrigation system operates, and your greens profile and water movement dynamics in that setup. We want to get the herbicide off the foliage and into the upper portion of the root zone. Follow that strategy to do that. And there's plenty of labels that I don't think have enough specificity, probably because you can't really specify something that soils aren't normally distributed, irrigation systems are variable. It would be hard to make that textbook. Becky, I think we have a question for you right now about how would you recommend doing the audits? Are you doing the tuna can test? Another technical term. If you could speak to that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so to Brandon's point, you can certainly do something like a tuna can test, which is basically a catch can test, right? Where we're using tuna fish cans instead of more formal catch cans. And you can do that on a smaller area. But to Brandon's point, it is a significant undertaking. So for a larger facility, a lot of times I think what we see on golf courses is that they'll contract out to a licensed irrigation auditor. And so you'll see that they may hire somebody to come in and do that. But then that can change a lot over the course of a year. I mean, really, you're talking about having to do that on an annual basis to really stay on top of what your output is. And the other thing that Brandon kind of alluded to that I think is very true is that the older these systems get, the more we see these kind of Frankenstein systems where they're an amalgam of different components, different heads with different outputs. And, that makes it very challenging as well. So there's a lot of great resources to do just a traditional catch can test. If you're managing lawns, it's a much more straightforward process than if you're managing large scale facilities. And but yeah, I think if you're doing it on a larger scale, you're probably looking at bringing in a professional that can help you not only look at that precipitation rate, but also the distribution uniformity and look at what changes need to be made to improve things based on your results.
Yeah, because you also have to. I know a couple of friends of mine that are superintendents that talk about how it's not just the distribution uniformity and it's not just the precipitation rate. It's understanding that you have a green that slopes 2.5% this way. So if you water more up here, eventually it's going to make its way down here, and you have to account for that in your irrigation practices. You don't want it all going evenly across the whole surface. You actually want it to be non-uniform so that the water gravitationally moves in the soil over time as well. And that's going to affect how much irrigation you put down too. And then add in that layer of, applying a herbicide, applying a fungicide, and it's still a lot of art based on science. It's not it's not as recipe specific.
Yeah.
And then to Becky's point, doing a home lawn audit is a much more straightforward thing. If you're working with a homeowner, a customer client that you're helping dial in their irrigation system, then that's a very different story than trying to do it over a 150 or 200 acre property.
Yeah, I mean, and the soil variability is incredible. Like, I have a student right now, and John, this is going to go back in the Wayback Machine for you and I, given our similar mentorship through graduate school. My student Ben Pritchard he's working through soil moisture retention curves, right? To look at the amount of tension that's on water in a soil column, because what he's seeing is that as soils vary texturally, well, in a sandier soil, there's less tension on that water and it's more available for root uptake by weed seedling, and in a heavier soil, while you can hold water for longer, there's more tension on the water, which makes it harder for the plant to absorb the herbicide from the solution. So like we could geek out on soil agrochemical interactions for, I don't know how long this thing would run, but we could go a pretty long time.
Yep, for sure.
Switching gears a little, Hannah, I know when we first met, it was kind of under the banner of the Endangered Species Act. Meant you, I think it was we were at a sod farm meeting in West Tennessee, and I think I was asked, do I know anybody in turf who is working or interested in the Endangered Species Act? And you about jumped over the table to say yes. Do you want to give the folks listening maybe a little bit of background on what that is?
Yeah, so first I'll start with so my story real quick.
Oh yeah. Sorry, we go on tangents. We're university professors. We just go on like tangents.
So my undergraduate degree is in ag business, and I had internships in the summer with FMC doing chemical sales. I decided that I did not want to do sales and make that my life. But I was interested in that kind of crop protection area. So I decided to get a master's, and I don't like bugs. Don't want to work with those. And sorry, Wendell and Brandon, I could think of nothing worse to do with my time than look at diseases. So I decided to go into weed science. I got my master's from the University of Arkansas in rice. So I had a rice project. And then from there, I went to the University of Georgia and worked with weed science in cotton, vegetables, and small grains. And so leading into do what? Go dogs. Yeah. So my PhD again was in not turf, but the guy that I worked with has been working with the EPA, working really closely with the EPA and other weed scientists to kind of steer the Endangered Species Act reform by the EPA into something that makes sense and is practical, which if you're familiar with the government, that tends to not happen very often. And so that is kind of where I almost jumped across the table begging Jim to let me help, because that was something that my PhD advisor was really passionate about, and he kind of imparted that onto me. And so yeah, so the Endangered Species Act, we're probably all a little bit familiar with it. It is, I think, around 60 years old or so, was passed quite a while back. But recently the EPA has been getting the pantsuit off of them because they basically have not been consulting the Endangered Species Act like they were supposed to when they are registering or re-registering pesticides. And so in order for the government to not lose more money, they have court-appointed deadlines to kind of reform how they address pesticide registration and re-registration and how they are going to do that moving forward. And so the first strategy that they've got will be the herbicide strategy, and it's kind of been pushed back and pushed back. They were supposed to have it published in May. I think the court gave them another deadline, so I think that deadline has been moved to August now. And within that, it's several things of, if you've ever heard of Bulletin's Lab 2, it is hopefully going to get a little bit better, but basically you would have to look at that before you apply any pesticide and make sure that you are not in a limited use area for an endangered species, in your area. And if you are, then there are additional restrictions that you have to follow based on that use limitation area. Additionally, so that's kind of special depending on where you're at and what species are present, but they are also kind of reforming how the label is written and some of the language that's on the label. And so that's going to be across the board moving forward once they finally get their strategy nailed down. And so like Jim had the superintendent look at the label, please always look at the label, always, especially as they're going to be changing in the next couple of years. And it's not just for herbicides. They're starting with herbicides, but I think the next one was fungicides or insecticides. And then so eventually it will be all pesticides.
So my understanding, Hannah, and you did a good job providing an overview here, is that they've developed these maps of different areas in each state where there are endangered species. And I know there's debate about where the lines are drawn, right? Between how many of of endangered species needs to be present to get that area flagged as an area of concern. And I think your advisor at Georgia and one of his former students, your colleague, did a really nice job kind of delineating that maybe some of the original maps for Georgia were wild overreaches of reality of where the species of concern were or were not.
Yeah, so that was so the endangered species has been historically based on whatever local game and fish or wildlife association that is done by each state. And so some of those maps have not been ground truthed in a very long time. But often, and what they found in Georgia was that when the 2,4-D crop use restrictions, so when the enlist restrictions went out, it eliminated the use of 2,4-D in 11 counties, which was several million acres in cotton country, and we have 2,4-D tolerant cotton. So that was not going to work. And so basically what they did was they took one county and they said, okay, having the endangered species basically took this whole county out, but they went and looked at some more detailed maps and they found that it was in this very, very tiny portion of the county was where the salamander habitat was. And instead of taking out 1 million acres, it took out a couple of thousand acres, or in that scenario, right? And so they are trying to show that, hey, we need more detailed maps. You can't just effectively ban the use of pesticides in these areas. You're going to have to update things so that we have a better representation.
So yeah, and it's good. It's good to know those things are to be determined, or I mean, or in development. Let's say where the lines will be drawn, because the last rendition I saw for Tennessee, it wasn't like it encompassed the entirety of the state. There was a region and restricted use region based on endangered species presence, probably in Middle Tennessee, somewhat south of Nashville. So we were luckier. I know the map for Arkansas looked much different compared to where we were at, but it's good to know that those things are still being developed, if you will. So then is it fair to assume then if one is in one of those regions and gets a newly labeled product, then they'll have to, in addition to following the label directions for how to apply it at a calibrated rate and a good timing, there'll be things that they need to do because they're in that region to satisfy the application being legal. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes. So Becky, real quick, did you have something that you wanted to?
No, I did want to just say though that like this was kind of a unique scenario. This is Taylor's work, right? That we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was kind of a unique scenario, right? That these salamanders had very specific habitats. And so it made it a little bit easier to do the spatial analysis to determine where those areas were. But there's a very extensive endangered species list that would make that very difficult for a lot of other species. And so that is going to be a huge challenge going forward to provide that level of detail, right? I think
that's right. So quickly, and I'll get back to Jim's question. So real quick, I think if I should have looked at my notes before this, but I think there are 650 endangered species, and that list is expected to double essentially over the next few years. And so yes, so those salamanders that they were looking at in Georgia in those specific counties had very specific habitats, and fortunately, that habitat map had been updated more recently. It's going to be a challenge for some of those that are either newly added and we don't exactly know, or some of those that have been added to the list a long time ago, and basically that hasn't been updated or ground truthed in a long time. So back to Jim's question. So the main takeaways that I saw from how to adjust your application, I think it's going to be, and this might also be on the label. So I think most labels are going to change where you cannot apply within a certain amount of hours of expected rainfall. especially if it's projected to be over like a certain amount. So when, you know, we've been really wet out this way. Friday night, I got almost 5 inches of rain at my house. So if I knew that a system like that was coming through, I would not have been able to apply a herbicide like in my lawn, for example. It's also going to change some of the language that we look at regarding drift. So making sure that we use drift reduction agents, or it might change the nozzle types that you can use. I should have prefaced this is that this is starting with agronomic crops. These restrictions are not in place on turf, and I don't even know when they will get to turf. So I think that's kind of, you know, where you and I had left off, Jim, is that we've got some time. We don't know how much time, but we've got some time to kind of look at some of these things and make sure that we shape the policy for turf based on science, and not just based on science in turf, and not something in cotton that's grown in South Georgia or corn that's grown in the Midwest. As far as additional restrictions, if you're in a use limitation area, so this is why they're taking a long time to get the herbicide strategy republished, is because that pick list that they have is insane, and it's really hard to follow. It's hard for me to follow. It's hard for other people to follow. They can't even follow it. And so that is kind of the reason why it's taking forever, is because they're trying to fix that pick list of mitigation strategies. So it could, for example, in agronomic crops, leaving a buffer strip, either, you know, down at the lower end of your field, or leaving a buffer strip around the ditch or around the edges of your field. I can't even remember what some of the rest of them were. It's an insane list, and there's a point system. All that to say is, thankfully, that's in agronomic crops. We don't have to quite address that yet, and hopefully they'll get those kinks worked out before they bring that into turf.
And we have lots of representatives from the industry that are involved in those conversations, which I think is important for listeners to know. I know that GCSAA has a very strong presence in those conversations. I know that TPI has a very strong presence in those conversations. So I think there are turf voices that are part of that dialogue, and will help to shape what some of that looks like.
Well, and it's interesting to me too that several, not all, but several of the things on the pick lists are things that just are default because turf is turf, right? Like having a grass buffer strip at the edge of a field are the entirety of what we manage is a grass buffer strip, right? So hopefully when this all shakes out, the end product accounts for some of the, like you said, Hannah, the differences in turf that aren't present in corn or soybeans or wheat or cotton. Thanks for working on it. I'm glad you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to take the baton and run with it. I'm glad you jumped across the table to say that.
Yeah, me too. But
So
yeah, go ahead.
Before we wrap up here, I guess in the last 10 minutes or so, like, is there anything that you're working on, either of you, Wendell or Hannah, at Arkansas right now, and has you particularly excited for 2024?
You want to start us, or?
So again, being new to turf, I always find out my ideas when I talk to Wendell or Jim or Becky. I'm still in my shell learning phase. Becky has been gracious enough to add me on to a grant that hopefully will get funded. We don't know. So I don't have any of my own research or anything that I'm working on. I'm just excited to learn turf, continue learning turf. I can now tell the difference between zoysia and Bermuda grass, whereas before that was just grass. I can even identify St. Augustine grass. So no, it's a little bit more in depth than that, but no, I'm just excited to learn turf systems, right? I'm an agronomist. It's just a little bit, just slightly different, just a little shift. So it's not that difficult for me to pick up. It just takes a lot of time. And so I'm excited to just keep learning, listening to Wendell when he talks about aeration or anything like that. So I'm just excited to continue learning and you know, trying to be a better turf weed scientist so that I can help my folks out.
Well, yeah,
Hannah, I guarantee you'll pick it up. I was going to say, I'll guarantee that you'll pick it up faster than the gentleman at the local facility that I took a couple of undergraduates to go sample some dollar spot from earlier today. That came over and asked me first if I was setting up a laser putting station for practicing my putting, and I'm like, no, we're just sampling. He's like, oh, are these dollar coin spot things? And he's like, I know all about that stuff. And he's like, the reason why it's down here is because this is a low area and it stays wet. And he goes through this whole diatribe about the fungal biology of dollar spot. And I'm just going, yep, yep, yep,
Very
yep,
good.
yep. All the while I'm just taking my samples, and then thankfully we were done quickly, so I didn't have to hear too much more about the all the scientific knowledge this guy had. So yeah, I'm confident that you'll pick turf up a lot faster than some golfers that we have in our midst.
Well, I'll say this: Hannah sells herself short a little bit on her agronomic abilities. She's picked it up way faster than I did in her first year and a half in the job. So it's been fun working with her, going on extension visits. So we have this little thing. I'll get into some of the projects we're working on here in just a minute, but we have this thing we're doing this year in 2024 called Turf Tour. And so we both have extension appointments. And so one of our goals is I work more closely probably with the golf industry, and Hannah works very closely with the sod industry here in Arkansas. And so we're kind of sharing contacts. And so today, after we're done with this meeting, we're going to go visit a golf course. And then tomorrow we're going to visit a couple more places. And so every 3 weeks, we're trying to go on this turf tour to different parts of the state to reach out to different turf professionals. So it's been fun to be a part of that. And she brings the weed science background, and I bring the more pathology and kind of general agronomy. So it's a pretty fun tandem, and I think the growers around the state enjoy working with us, and it's definitely reciprocated on our part.
You
But
need
yeah, it's been.
t-shirts.
Do I?
You need t-shirts. Turf Tour
We do need
2024.
We
Yeah.
joked that we were
Have
gonna.
all the cities.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We'll get a map going. We joked that we were going to make like one of those little cardboard QR code signs that has like hashtag Turf Tour 24. But we decided against that. We're nerds, but not that nerdy. But yeah, it's been fun. So we're kind of hitting different parts of the state, and yeah, it's been good. We got some projects going. My appointment, Hannah didn't mention this, but her appointment's a little less research heavy. I think it's 75 extension.
Yeah, so I have
25.
75% extension, 25% research. It lets me do whatever I want.
Yep. And mine's a little bit different where I have
100.
a heavier research appointment. So we kind of balance each other. She's handles more of the extension activities in the state. And I think I handle a little bit more of the research activities, but it's been fun. Got a few graduate students right now. All of them are working on a variety of projects. One student's working on spring dead spot. I always joke with him that he's basically, I did my PhD on spring dead spot, and I said he's doing his master's on the projects I didn't get to during my PhD. So he's been great. His name's Mike Battaglia. And then I've got another student, Sharon Deep Shahal. He's working on zoysia grass diseases, primarily large patch. And then we've got this weird funk, I'm calling it. I think it's yellow tuft. We're pretty confident it's yellow tuft, an oomycete. That we're seeing on some really highly maintained zoysia grasses in the state, particularly like golf course fairways. And so we're trying to figure that one out, and he's the right guy for the job. So, and then the last project is one that Hannah and I are co-advising as students. His name's Sam Kreinberg, and this kid is unbelievable. He's a statistician and a math major who had worked on golf courses for 6 years. And I'm like, that's a match made in heaven to have somebody to come into grad school. He already knows statistics, and he knows how to present very well and analyze data. And so he's got two really kind of disparate projects, but both of them have to do with using technology for pest management. So he's got one project where he's developing maps and models of large patch on zoysia grass. So he's using drone imagery and some different data collection methods. And then the second project is where Hannah comes in as the weed scientist, and he's basically built this robotic sprayer that has a camera attached to it, and it can see essentially it senses different weed species. And so as you're going in real time, it can say, oh, there's a POA plant, I'm going to spray. Oh, there's a goosegrass plant, I'm going to spray. And he's developed a
Does
really
it
impressive
say,
code.
oh, it's a POA plant?
Well,
Does it say it's a
Yeah. We're
POA?
gonna add
That's
we're gonna add
Poana.
sound effects to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
That's
yeah,
Poana.
Jim, I'll be,
Oh,
Jim, I'll be
there it
asking you
is.
to record that for us. Oh, Poa.
yeah.
I think it says, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
There it is. That's right.
That was
yeah,
easy.
So that's actually the technology that was developed by someone who is now an assistant professor in the University of Arkansas system. He essentially developed that, and so he developed that for row crops. So Sam is working on kind of ground truthing that in turf, because I think it could have a really good application. Try not to get too much into things that I can't talk about, but it'll be a little bit more open source than perhaps other see and spray technologies on the market. Would also be something that you could kind of retrofit existing equipment into fitting. So I think it has really good utility. I'm excited about Sam's project.
Yeah.
Really excited to see how that works, and try to develop that further. Kind of, going back to the Endangered Species Act, right? I think that's going to be something really important. Is limiting, especially for us, right? Post-emergence herbicide usage, and so I'm really excited about that project.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We have fun as a turf team here at Arkansas, and I'd be remiss without mentioning Dr. Mike Richardson. I call him the godfather of our program. He's kind of the fearless leader, and he's got the Italian in him too, so it works out well. But he's a great guy.
I'm gonna give you an offer you can't refuse.
That's right. That's exactly right. So it's
Well,
been
I just want to say I think it's really awesome that you guys are there, and I'm really excited about it. And I think, Hannah, your non-turf agronomic background, as much as you're going to learn in turf, we're going to learn from you, I think, because you're going to look at things from a different lens. And I think that's what's really exciting about what I've heard today from you. And then Wendell, you surrounded the state now of Tennessee. So I think there's going to be a lot of good correlations from North Carolina to Virginia to Arkansas. But I think, we've had a really good history. Obviously, one of your predecessors, Dr. Karcher, he and I were roommates for 5 years at Michigan State, and Brandon was grad students. And so when I got here to Tennessee 22 years ago, the first thing was Doug was at Arkansas for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And then Dr. Richardson, both opened up and really made it welcoming for me to be at Tennessee. Mike shared a lot of his lectures with me that I still use a lot in my introduction to turf classes, some of his slides and some of the stuff. So we've exchanged graduate students. My first PhD student, John Kaufman, was and I always said, Doug, you train him as masters, and I'll take him as PhDs, because I knew he would teach them really well, good scientific methods and statistics they'd be strong in. But John Kaufman and Tyler Carr, very successful. And then we sent Dan Strunk and Will Newsom, or not Will Newsom, but Will Jellicourse, and to you guys. And we've had grad students go back and forth, and it's been really successful. So, I mean, I hope we can have that, and a lot of research collaboration. It's great to hear you're on the grant with Becky, Hannah, because, doing the studies at both locations in the same year helps us, get something done in 1 year and get it published a lot quicker. So what we can do at Tennessee to help would be, let us know. We're all here for you as a turf team, because Arkansas is important to us as well.
On 2 grants together, Hannah.
Two grants together. There you go.
See, once again,
It's awesome. I'm really excited.
Well, I appreciate that,
for all
Dr.
that.
Schrock, and we're certainly excited to be next door neighbors to you guys. I always joke that Tennessee is the bridge. Some from Virginia, so Tennessee's the bridge from Arkansas to Virginia. It's just a long bridge, but it connects both states, though.
Yeah, that is a long bridge for sure. For those who need GCSAA CEUs, I've had this on the screen for the past several minutes, but this is your event approval code on the screen here. You'll log this into the GCSAA website. Again, this has absolutely nothing to do with pesticide accreditation. So this is only for superintendents. When you log this, if you are watching this as a recording, you want to make sure that you put today's event date as June 4th to make sure you get your CEUs as intended. And with that, I got 12:30 on my clock here, so I promise to get everybody out on time. We had one question come in late about sulfentrazone. I'd encourage the person who asked that, email me directly or contact me, and we can go deep down the sulfentrazone rabbit hole together and fully tease that question apart. But for the betterment of the group, I'll kind of end it there and say thanks, as has been echoed, you know, with John and Brandon and Becky's remarks, Wendell and Hannah. It's great to have you both in the Southeast as new faces and new experts and new friends for us. So appreciate you coming on Turf Tuesdays, and I know we'll be collaborating in a lot of things in the future. So best of luck to you in 2024.
Thank you guys for having
you.
us.
Awesome.
Thanks
Well,
for coming on.
That leaves us at the end of our time together for this episode. We'll be back in July. One of the things we're going to do with the summer editions of Turf Tuesday this year is we're going to have an alumni spotlight. So we're going to feature different UT alumni throughout the summer. So our first one of those will kick off in July. So until then, we will see you all later. Thanks for listening.